Hello, everyone. I know it's quite late and it's almost the end of the conference, so everyone wants to go for a drink afterwards, so I'll try to be very brief. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for contributing to this conference, and in particular, the Hack in the Box team, which has done an amazing job so far. And I also want to thank all the speakers, the trainers, and of course, the attendees and volunteers. So just a few information about where we stand with Hack in the Box in Singapore GSEC today. So it was, again, an amazing event. The event was structured around 5 different technical trainings, very hands-on technical trainings, aiming at educating, upskilling cybersecurity professionals in the area of source code auditing, threat intelligence gathering, etc. We also had an amazing opportunity to discuss in depth very interesting topics across 2 different tracks and 1 panel discussion. It was also a great platform to showcase the skills of cybersecurity professionals during the CTF competition, which was co-organized with XCTF China team, and the very first EDU CTF developed by Hack in the Box, which showcased level of skills at a very high level. And what's really interesting about the Hack in the Box GSEC Singapore conference is the fact it's a really intimate setting, which really enables the high level of interaction, high quality discussions. It's very difficult to summarize the richness of the content of such a conference. So I decided to choose 3 different topics that were recurring themes and recurring interesting challenges that were mentioned during the conference. So the first one is the rise of IoT and the fact that we know that by 2020 there will be 20 billion devices in circulation. And this is very relevant given the fact that 70% of current devices have basic level of vulnerabilities. And this is on one side very challenging because we know that the risk associated to discovering vulnerabilities can have a great cascade risk towards not only the device itself, but the entire industry. This is the consumer perspective side, but there's also, of course, the smart nation, smart country perspective, which also needs to basically improve the level of security to protect their critical infrastructures. The second area, which was discussed this afternoon by Salvador, was essentially the complexity, the increase of complexity in the digital payment attacks. So basically we're seeing some kind of paradox in which basically the attacks in order to conduct digital payment are becoming more complex, but at the same time the barriers or the way you can enable those attacks is becoming easier. So basically what he was discussing is that with even basic supporting technologies, such as NFC, involving NFC, SDR, you're able to conduct such attacks for a few dozen dollars. Finally, a very interesting topic that was mentioned yesterday during the panel discussion was the lack of regulation in regard to the zero-day market. And this poses very interesting challenges. The first one is that there's a mismatch between demand and supply of exploits. In fact, Andrea from CrowdFence was kind enough to share some stats and basically show that 5% only of the exploits are actually purchased by those third-party providers or third-party companies. And that is partially because some of the exploits discovered are either too dangerous to be shared or simply they're not relevant for the market. And in the context of the lack of regulation, this poses very interesting challenges because we all know that those exploits, if they fall into ill-intended organizations, people, or countries, well, it's going to generate additional issues. So if we try to put these 3 main challenges into perspective and we try to identify potential high-level initial solutions, we can say that first for IoT devices, well, the first thing to do is to try to challenge the current paradigm of having all the internet connected to, all the devices connected to the internet. do we really need to have, for example, a bottle of waters, trousers, or pillows connected to the internet? So this mindset needs to evolve. The second thing is we need to really rethink the value chain from the vendor OEM perspective, in the sense that we need to be able to understand better the security measures before the products get released to market. And it means that the vendors and OEMs need to take an active role, an active stance at pressuring the suppliers in providing security reports. Of course, this is very difficult to implement when you think about it, but it can be done at certain level of industries, certain level of sectors, and this is a first step towards improving the security levels. And one of the most important initiatives that can be developed is, of course, to raise the awareness of the end consumers. So if you are able to generate a demand-driven change in security levels, you're going to be able to have devices that are more secure by definition. So if you are able to explain to the consumers that they need to pay $80 their camera instead of $10, but it will be a secure camera, that would be a very good step. Of course, there's always the regulation aspect that needs to be taken into consideration, especially when it comes to software reinforcement. When it comes to the second area of challenge and the digital payment in the context of the NFC ecosystem, well, most of the financial institutions don't take this as a big risk because they think of it as an accepted risk. However, Salvador showed this afternoon that the amount that can be intercepted can be easily scaled up, which poses even more challenges. So essentially, they need to find alternative layers of protection against relay and replay attacks in their products. Finally, when we come about the third aspect, which is improving the zero-day market, well, in particular, there is an urgent need to reinforce and provide clearer regulations and guidelines. And this needs to be done at the trans-industry, transnational level in order to be really effective and to generate some kind of cooperation. This can be done by either having better classifications around the vulnerabilities, better pricing models, and also disclosures of dangerous vulnerabilities. So as you can see, most and some of the recommendations around regulations, but we need to be very careful with regulation. Alan Wilson, a famous American politician, said that the more regulation you put, the less personal freedom you have. So we need to find the exact balance between personal freedom and, of course, regulation without falling into the trap of compliance. Thank you.